Ethan had a reputation for being straight-laced, almost aggressively so, but that did nothing to curb Julian's interest. Julian orchestrated their encounters with subtle precision, weaving a web of casual proximity and veiled invitations. It all culminated one night, fueled by expensive whiskey, when Julian took the lead, decisively and without apology. The experience itself, however, was a disaster. Ethan was built like a god but moved with the finesse of a novice. The next morning, muscles aching, Julian slipped out before sunrise. Days later, Ethan cornered him outside a downtown lounge. He was thrown over Ethan's shoulder and carried back to his penthouse, his protests lost in the city noise. Ethan's jaw was tight, his voice a low growl. He asked what kind of dream Julian was living in, thinking he could hook him and then just move on to the next catch. The music inside the lounge had been a physical force, vibrating through the floor. Julian, holding a glass of scotch, had watched Ethan across the room. He was in a booth with friends, one arm draped over the back of the seat, the other idly scrolling through his phone. The shifting strobe lights carved his features into sharp relief, giving him an air of handsome, predatory stillness. Julian finished his drink, smoothed the front of his shirt, and stood to leave. As he passed Ethan's booth, a balding, intoxicated man blocked his path, slurring an invitation to go play. Julian's expression remained impassive as he requested the man to move. The man stumbled, then pointed a wavering finger at Julian's chest, insisting he shouldn't be shy, that he had plenty of money. When the man's hand reached out to grab his arm, Julian's patience snapped. He recoiled, his voice dropping to a cold whisper, telling him to get his filthy hands away. The shove sent the drunk man careening into a table, a cascade of bottles shattering on the floor. The sudden noise drew eyes from all around. Humiliated, the man staggered to his feet, spitting a curse. He sneered that someone who looked like Julian, in a place like this, was obviously selling something, and that he should be grateful for the attention. Before he could finish, Julian picked up an empty beer bottle from a nearby table and brought it down on the man's head without a flicker of hesitation. A sickening crack echoed through the momentary silence, followed by a pained howl as the man collapsed. Julian stood over him, holding the jagged neck of the broken bottle, as astonished whispers rippled through the crowd. A figure burst from Ethan's booth. It was Leo, Julian's cousin, who had been laughing and playing dice with Ethan moments before. He navigated the broken glass, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. He looked from the man on the floor to Julian and asked what on earth he was doing here. Julian tossed the bottle aside and wiped his fingers on a napkin, stating calmly that he was on his way home when he was stopped by someone with no sense. Leo stared, exclaiming that the guy must have had a death wish. The club manager arrived with security, his face a mask of concern that morphed into relieved recognition upon seeing Julian. He apologized profusely for the disturbance, assuring Julian it would be handled and that his tab for the night was on the house. Julian gave a curt nod. Leo, after giving the man on the floor a kick for good measure, offered to drive Julian home, remembering a moment too late that he had also been drinking. That was when Ethan spoke. From the booth, a voice cut through the commotion, offering a ride. The man who had been a silent observer now stood, stretching his shoulders. He walked over, his height commanding attention. He remarked that he hadn't been drinking and was tired anyway. He told Julian it was time to go. In the car, Ethan's Porsche Cayenne slicing through the late-night traffic, he glanced over. He commented with a dry smirk that for someone who looked so refined, Julian certainly didn't hesitate when it came to wielding a beer bottle. Julian, leaning his head against the passenger window, simply explained that some people were just clueless. Ethan asked if he was uncomfortable. Julian clarified that it wasn't discomfort, just a slight dizziness from the scotch. Ethan wondered aloud if Julian was drinking alone to mend a broken heart, musing that there were plenty of fish in the sea. Julian thought to himself that the only fish he was interested in was the one driving the car. Ethan changed the subject, mentioning that he hadn't dated much because no one had ever met his standards. He found people today too superficial. Soon, the Cayenne slowed to a stop in front of Julian's apartment building. As Julian reached for the seatbelt, his fingers brushed against the back of Ethan's hand. The contact was fleeting, but the temperature difference was stark. Ethan flinched, asking why his hand was so cold. He touched it again as if to confirm, then quickly pulled back. Julian flexed his fingers, admitting he was a bit cold and should have worn a warmer coat. He thanked Ethan and opened the door. Just as he was stepping out, Ethan called his name. A moment later, a black coat, still warm from Ethan's body, was draped over his shoulders. Ethan told him he was old enough to know how to dress for the weather and to just return it later. The car sped off, disappearing into the night. Julian stood there, wrapped in the coat, a slow smile spreading across his face. He and Ethan moved in the same elite circles but had never truly interacted. Julian was known for his striking looks, Ethan for his supposed aversion to gay men, a reputation born from a messy incident at a frat party in college. But Julian wanted him. Back in his apartment, he opened his chat with Ethan, a conversation that had consisted of a single friend request. He typed a message. "I'll bring your coat back tomorrow." A voice note came back almost instantly. Ethan's voice was low. "No rush. I'll swing by and get it sometime." Days passed with no word. Julian knew approaching Ethan required a delicate touch, a subtle infiltration into his life. A week later, he stood outside his own building with a suitcase and sent a message. "Leo, I'm downstairs. Had a fight with my parents. Can I crash at your place for a few days?" He let the message sit for 55 seconds before retracting it, then followed up with, "Sorry, wrong person." Less than 10 seconds later, his phone rang. It was Ethan. "Stay put," he said. 10 minutes later, a silver Panamera appeared like a sleek predator, screeching to a halt in front of him. The window rolled down to reveal Ethan's roguish grin. He asked if Julian was really that pathetic, then told him to get in, offering him sanctuary for a few days. Julian smiled and complied. Ethan's guest room was enormous, practically a second master suite. He brought Julian a collection of brand new toiletries. He then launched into a clumsy attempt at a pep talk, saying that the best way to get over a failed relationship was to start a new one, and that Julian shouldn't be fighting with his parents about going on dates. Julian just gave him a sidelong glance and said he was still hung up on someone, then tossed Ethan's coat to him. Ethan caught it, remarking that it was impressive Julian had carried it around for a week. He asked if he wanted some water. Julian nodded. As he replied to a new string of texts, Ethan returned with a glass of water. Julian's hands were busy typing, so he simply leaned forward and took a sip directly from Ethan's hand. After sending his reply, he took the glass. He looked up to find Ethan staring at him, seemingly lost in thought. Julian asked him what was wrong. Ethan shook his head, saying it was nothing, and asked who he was texting so furiously. Julian arched an eyebrow and replied that he was arguing with his mother, then offered to show him the messages. Ethan just called him a rebel and said he was going to take a shower. As he turned to leave, Julian stopped him, asking if he had any pajamas he could borrow. The cotton t-shirt and pants Ethan gave him were massive. After showering, Julian looked at his reflection in the steamy mirror. Ethan was tall and well-built, and on Julian's own 6-foot frame, The clothes hung loosely, the wide collar revealing an expanse of pale skin. He ran a towel through his hair and walked out. Ethan was on the living room sofa, a towel around his waist, engrossed in a video game. Julian asked where the hairdryer was. Ethan, without looking up from the screen, pointed to a high cabinet. It was clear he never used it himself. Julian stretched but couldn't reach it. He was about to ask for help when he noticed Ethan's gaze was fixed not on the game, but on his waist. Ethan asked if anyone had ever told him his skin was very pale. Julian leaned against the cabinet, a playful smile on his face. He had been told he was pale, handsome, striking. He'd heard every compliment imaginable. He then asked if the esteemed Mr. Ethan would mind getting off his noble ass and helping him with the hairdryer. Ethan tossed his phone aside, the sound of game over echoing in the quiet room. He walked over, muttering that attractive people were always so needy. He reached up, his arm brushing against Julian's, and easily retrieved the box. But instead of handing it over, he unwrapped it, plugged it in, and began drying Julian's hair himself. The warm air and the feeling of Ethan's long fingers massaging his scalp sent a pleasant hum through Julian's body. When his hair was dry and fluffy, Ethan ruffled it gently and remarked that he was quite docile. Julian subtly shifted his position. With Ethan so close, practically encircling him, the small movement made it seem as if Julian had turned in his arms. He was now so close that a slight lean forward would press his face into the bare skin of Ethan's chest. He smiled, patting Ethan's shoulder. He praised his excellent technique and said he'd be sure to request his services again. Ethan let out a laugh and made a move to playfully wrestle him, but Julian slipped away and escaped back to his room. The next morning, a loud knocking at his door failed to wake him. Ethan eventually let himself in, complaining about him sleeping in like a child when breakfast was ready. Julian just pulled the covers over his head. Ethan climbed onto the bed and began pulling at the blankets like an exasperated parent. As the blanket came loose, Julian rolled over, still half asleep, and wrapped his arms around Ethan's waist, burying his face against him. He mumbled for Buddy to stop messing around and let him sleep. The person in his arms went completely still. The incessant chatter stopped. Satisfied, Julian shifted to get more comfortable, his leg brushing against undeniable evidence of a normal male morning response. His eyes fluttered open. He saw the sharp line of Ethan's jaw, the bob of his Adam's apple, and a faint blush creeping up his neck. After a long moment, Julian sat up, rubbing his eyes as if just waking up. He asked Ethan what he was doing there. Ethan scrambled off the bed, his posture stiff. He said he was just trying to get him up for breakfast and then marched out of the room, his movements comically rigid. Julian smiled to himself and got out of bed. At the dining table, Julian ate the slightly burnt eggs Ethan had made. Ethan kept stealing glances at him, his expression a mixture of curiosity and confusion. Finally, Julian put down his fork and asked him what he wanted to say. After a moment of hesitation, Ethan asked quietly if Julian had mistaken him for his ex-girlfriend. He then asked if her name was Buddy. Julian explained that Buddy was his Alaskan Malamute, who used to sleep in his room. A look of immense relief washed over Ethan's face. Julian began his extended stay at Ethan's penthouse. Neither of them mentioned him going home. Ethan, for some reason, started filling the guest room with things. A rug identical to the one in his own room, a life-sized Malamute body pillow, aromatherapy diffusers. The only thing he didn't provide was more pajamas. Julian continued to borrow his. Over the next month, Julian discovered Ethan's peculiar fixation. He loved the feel of cool skin. and Julian, due to his constitution, was perpetually cool to the touch. One evening, as they sat on the sofa, Ethan's hand brushed his arm. His eyes lit up. From then on, it became a nightly ritual. He would incessantly stroke Julian's arms, particularly the soft skin on the underside of his biceps. After a solid half-hour of this one night, Julian pulled his arm away, telling him to stop. Ethan pleaded for just 5 more minutes. Julian stood to escape, but Ethan grabbed the hem of his shirt, pulling him off balance. He tumbled into Ethan's lap, his head knocking against Ethan's chin. To steady him, Ethan's hands clamped onto his waist, but Julian's shirt had ridden up, and Ethan's warm palms were now pressed directly against his bare skin. The position was dangerously intimate. Julian shot him a glare, but Ethan just grinned, saying there was nowhere to run. He then commented on how cool his waist was and began to explore. A sudden ticklish sensation made Julian gasp and bury his face in Ethan's neck. The sound, a soft, involuntary hum, seemed to short-circuit something in Ethan. His hands froze. The atmosphere shifted. Julian could feel the subtle changes in the body beneath him. He looked up and met a pair of dark, intense eyes. Pretending not to notice, he removed Ethan's hands from his waist, grabbed a throw pillow, and hit him with it, accusing him of trying to squeeze him to death. Ethan's playful demeanor returned. He held Julian in place with one arm and resumed his stroking with the other, bargaining for 5 more minutes in exchange for a fancy dinner the next day. After his allotted time, he reluctantly let Julian go. Julian retreated to his room, his skin still tingling. It had taken all his self-control not to react more strongly. The next morning, Ethan dragged him from bed, excitedly announcing it was time for his birthday dinner. Julian, still groggy, pointed out it was only 9 a.m. An hour later, Ethan was dressed in a tailored suit and overcoat, his hair perfectly styled. He had even used cologne. He declared that a man turning 28 needed to look his best. It was only then that Julian realized it was his birthday. They drove to a private restaurant on the far north side of the city. The place was chic and understated, exactly Julian's style. Shortly after they ordered, a woman in a slinky dress approached their table and asked Julian for his number. Ethan, who had been looking at his phone, immediately looked up, his eyes sharp. Julian politely declined. The woman persisted, leaning closer, asking if he had a girlfriend or was married. Julian glanced at Ethan, who was now watching with a mixture of irritation and vigilance. Julian made a decision. He gestured towards Ethan with a smile and told the woman he was sorry, but he was celebrating with his partner, who would get jealous. The woman's eyes widened as she looked at Ethan. Julian kicked him under the table. Ethan's expression shifted instantly from surprise to a parody of coyness. He fluttered his eyelashes, brought a hand to his mouth in a theatrical gesture, and simpered, "Oh, honey, you shouldn't say things like that in public. You'll make me blush." The woman stared, dumbfounded by the sight of this tall, masculine man behaving so dramatically. She finally straightened up, her expression vacant, and said that if he had refused again, she was going to try her luck with his friend. She wished them happiness and walked away. Julian suppressed a laugh and complimented Ethan on his quick thinking, though his acting was a bit over the top. Ethan, still in character, reached under the table and playfully squeezed his leg. He then continued in a high-pitched voice, asking his honey to buy him clothes and jewelry and bags. The performance was so cringeworthy that Julian had to cover his face with one hand. Through his fingers, he mumbled, "Buy anything you want. I'll buy it all for you." That evening, Leo organized a birthday party for Ethan at a private club. Julian found himself in a VIP room, losing round after round of a drinking game. "Julian's losing again," someone shouted. "He's terrible at this game. Drink up." He just smiled and downed another glass. Ethan leaned in close, his breath warm against Julian's ear, asking if he was okay. As Julian turned his head, his lips brushed against Ethan's nose. The lighting was too dim to read his expression. Julian smiled and leaned back in, whispering that he could handle more. After another lost round, a full glass was placed in front of him. As he reached for it, Ethan intercepted, taking the glass and saying he would drink it for him. But someone else protested, saying Ethan couldn't sub for Julian on his first night out with them. Leo chimed in, assuring Ethan that his cousin could outdrink their father. Julian chuckled, took the glass from Ethan, and, looking him directly in the eye, drank from the exact spot Ethan's lips had touched before finishing it in one go. He stood, announcing he was going to the restroom. As he passed Ethan, he swayed slightly. Ethan's hand shot out to steady him, his arm wrapping around his waist. He offered to go with him, worried he might fall. Julian waved him off, telling him to go back to his cake, and made his way to the men's room alone. Once inside, he straightened up, the act of drunkenness falling away. He splashed cold water on his face. In the mirror, his face was flushed, and his eyes were bright with moisture. He looked convincingly intoxicated. He smiled, then walked out. Ethan was waiting for him, holding his coat. He immediately wrapped it around Julian, saying they were going home. He insisted that Julian was too drunk to stay. In the back of the cab, Julian closed his eyes and leaned his head against the window. When the car stopped at a red light, he let himself lurch forward with the momentum, his head coming to rest on Ethan's shoulder. He felt Ethan's intense gaze on him. After a moment, Ethan brushed the hair from his forehead, his fingers tracing a line down to his lips. He shifted, allowing Julian to rest more comfortably against him. Then, he whispered so softly it was barely audible, "I must be going insane." Julian, feigning sleep, just hummed and nestled closer into the crook of his neck. Back at the penthouse, Ethan carried him to the sofa. He took off Julian's shoes, then went to the kitchen. Julian, his voice small, asked for some water. When Ethan returned with a warm mug of honey water, Julian took a few sips from his hand. Ethan knelt before him and asked if his head still hurt. Julian shook his head, then leaned forward until he was resting against Ethan's chest. He could feel the frantic pulse in Ethan's throat. He stared at it for a moment, then, driven by an impulse amplified by alcohol, he bit down gently on the taut skin. The hand on his waist tightened. Ethan's voice was hoarse as he started to speak, but Julian gave him no chance. He pushed Ethan back onto the sofa and climbed on top of him. He traced the shape of Ethan's lips with a fingertip, his voice a low murmur. "Ethan," he said, "let me give you a birthday present." Ethan's eyes were dark whirlpools. "What is it?" Julian smiled. "Me." He lowered his head and kissed him. The aftermath was a blur of clumsy, intense exploration. When morning came, the alcohol had worn off and rational thought returned. Julian looked at the man sleeping beside him and felt a wave of uncertainty. It had been an impulsive act, a deviation from his careful plan. He couldn't predict Ethan's reaction upon waking. The thought of seeing disgust on his face was unbearable. In moments of uncertainty, his first instinct was always to retreat. He quietly slipped out of bed, dressed, and left the apartment. He needed to give Ethan space to process. He needed to regain control. Back at his own place, he found several missed calls and a barrage of frantic messages from Ethan. "Where did you go? Did you go to work? It's Sunday. Why aren't you answering? You can't just sleep with me and run away, Julian. Answer the phone. If you keep ignoring me, I'm gonna get angry. Okay, I won't be harsh. Just text me back when you see this, sweetheart. The messages reeked of a desperate, abandoned lover. Julian paused. It seemed Ethan wasn't disgusted after all. He typed a reply, dealing with something. I'll be back later. The response came after a long pause. Okay, handle your business. He spent the day recovering. Late that night, his phone rang, an unfamiliar number. It was the manager from a bar across town. He said that Leo was there, drunk and heartbroken over another breakup, and asked if Julian could come get him. The manager mentioned he had tried calling Ethan, but Ethan had gruffly replied that his own partner had run off and he was in no mood to deal with anyone else. Julian sighed. It seemed his escape had been labeled. As he was about to enter the bar, a shadow detached itself from the wall and slammed him against the brick. It was Ethan. His face was dark, his voice dangerously low. He said this was what Julian had to deal with. He asked who he was meeting at the bar. Before Julian could form a coherent denial, Ethan's face twisted with a mix of anger and hurt. He growled that he had waited outside Julian's building all day, only for him to head straight here. He accused Julian of trying to find a new target after landing him. Then he bent down, hoisted Julian over his shoulder, and strode away, ignoring the astonished stare of the bar manager who had just come outside. Ethan threw him onto the bed in the master bedroom. He sat opposite him, his expression grim. He said they needed to have a talk about last night. Julian clutched a pillow to his chest. Ethan suddenly swept a pile of items from the nightstand onto the bed between them. Bank cards, a set of keys, stacks of share certificates. He laid them out. All his cards with all his money. 3 other properties besides the penthouse. 5 cars in the garage. His 30% stake in his family's company. He pushed it all towards Julian, his expression deadly serious, like a child offering up his most precious treasures. He asked if Julian had any other questions about his personal assets. Julian looked from the pile of wealth to Ethan's face. A slow smile spread across his lips. Nothing special, he said softly. I have everything you have and probably more. Ethan let out a frustrated sound, grabbed the pillow from Julian's arms, and pulled him onto his lap, crushing him in a hug. I don't care, he said, his chin resting on Julian's head. I'm in love with you, and you started this. You have to take responsibility. A warm, joyful feeling bloomed in Julian's chest. He buried his face in Ethan's shirt, his shoulders shaking with silent laughter. He told Ethan he had a secret to share. He confessed that he had no ex, he'd never fought with his parents, and that he had been plotting to get close to him from the very beginning. He pulled back to look into a pair of eyes that reflected only him. So Julian asked, how about we start dating, Mr. Ethan? He leaned in and gave him a short, sweet kiss. The smile that broke across Ethan's face was dazzling. He let out a low chuckle. You really have me wrapped around your finger, he murmured, before his mouth came down on Julian's, hungry and fierce. As the kiss deepened, a hand slipped under Julian's shirt, its heat tracing the sharp lines of his shoulder blades. Suddenly, Julian's eyes snapped open. He pushed Ethan away, his expression suddenly stern. No, he said, his voice cold. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. Ethan stared, bewildered. Why? Julian's gaze dropped. Your technique is abysmal, he stated flatly. I can't take it. He then slipped off the bed and walked out, leaving a stunned and deeply offended Ethan in his wake. The next morning, Ethan was back, pressing against him in bed, his hands exploring Julian's sides and thighs. He whispered in Julian's ear, his voice thick with sleep and desire, asking for another chance. He swore he'd spent the entire night watching tutorials and had definitely improved. An hour later, Julian was lying limp on the bed, an arm thrown over his eyes. Ethan was dutifully massaging his lower back, asking for a performance review. Julian exhaled slowly. "There's been progress," he admitted, his voice hoarse, but not much. Then, with what little strength he had left, he kicked Ethan off the bed. The world now knew Ethan had changed. He left parties early to go home. His social media was a shrine to his relationship. The 28-year-old iron tree had finally blossomed. His friends, and especially Leo, were in a state of shock. They would watch as Ethan shamelessly kissed Julian in public, their expressions a mixture of horror and confusion. They wondered what had happened to the guy who was supposedly the straightest man on the planet. Leo, looking particularly traumatized, complained to Julian that this was their payback for leaving him to get drunk and perform a striptease at the bar alone. Ethan, ignoring them all, just kissed Julian again and announced to the stunned group that from now on, they were to address Julian as his spouse. The silence was deafening. Julian, his face a blank mask, viciously pinched the muscle of Ethan's thigh. Ethan's proud expression contorted in pain. Julian then added, his voice devoid of emotion, that if anyone dared to call him that, he would twist their head off. Leo paled and whispered to the person next to him that his cousin had 3 years of martial arts training and he wasn't kidding. Within 5 minutes, the room was empty except for Leo, who was staring at his phone in despair. "Julian," he whined, "your mom is asking me if you're finally dating someone. What am I supposed to say?" Julian, for the 50th time that hour, pushed Ethan's roving hand off his arm. He told Leo to just say yes, and that he would be bringing her son-in-law home to meet her for the holidays. Later that night, Ethan asked why his mother was asking Leo about his love life. Julian, closing his laptop, explained that he'd always been so secretive and resistant to her matchmaking attempts that she had convinced herself he was nursing a broken heart over some long-lost love. Ethan burst out laughing. Julian grabbed the lapels of his bathrobe and pulled him closer. "So, my dear," he said, "are you ready to meet the in-laws?" Ethan's laughter filled the room as he wrapped Julian in his arms and kissed him soundly. He declared he was more than ready. He would add Julian's name to the house deed, pay any dowry she asked, and endure any parental trial. He was tough, he could take it. Julian's expression softened. As Ethan leaned in again, the bright lights of the penthouse seemed to melt away, leaving only the fierce, tender love that passed between them. Ethan covered Julian's eyes with his hand, his hot breath against his skin as he spoke, his voice full of a sincerity that was both new and eternal. "I will love you forever," he promised, "until our ashes meet the sea."